The family had left their home in Sydney, Australia a week ago and set sail from the docks in Little Bay. They had planned to be away for a month, sailing to Auckland, New Zealand to visit family and stay at one of his dad's seaside resorts. The Rogers family was a pioneer in building seaside communities and setting up beautiful resorts for the incredibly wealthy. James's great-grandfather started out digging ditches and working during the housing boom of the 1890s. Commercial growth blew up in Auckland, and every capable man who could swing a hammer and plow a shovel was hired to work on the construction sites. Over the decades, the family expanded their resort locations all along the eastern shore of New Zealand. They then decided they wanted to test the waters of Australia. 3 large resorts have been built in Melbourne, Adelaide, and Perth, becoming a massive moneymakers. This secured the Rogers family for the rest of their lives. Gordon Rogers, James's father, did not want to leave college with his business degree and become an instant vice president with the company. He wanted to start at the bottom and work his way up to the top, and that is precisely what he did. Gordon eventually became president of Rogers Resorts and helped grow the business and stay on top of every consumer's changing needs. He worked hard, loved his family, and decided to take everyone away for a long holiday. The Rogers family was enjoying the trip, and not always an easy thing with 3 children all under the age of 9. They set sail on their Oyster 595 60-foot sailing yacht. This was a lower-class super yacht, but nonetheless an extraordinary vessel. The Jumping Janet could sleep 9 people with its 1 master bedroom and 3 regular bedrooms. It also had couches that could be converted into sleepers to accommodate more guests. 9-year-old James enjoyed being out at sea and really loved reading about ocean life. His latest favorite book was Sharks of the World by Dr. Matthew Cooper. He knew Cooper was a big thing in the shark world and had seen him quite a few times on television during Shark Week. He was also very excited when he saw a new shark book on the shelves at Golden's Corner Books. 6-year-old Julia was a pixie. She was truly adorable and mischievous. She adored her mother and father, ignored her older brother since he would not play with her, and loved to cuddle with her younger brother Jackson. He was the baby of the family at 3 years old. He was full of innocent energy and learned his way around the boat very quickly. All 3 children loved sailing and never had any problems with seasickness. James was sitting with the big hardcover book on his lap. His light brown hair was blowing in the breeze, and his blue windbreaker was keeping him warm. He was flipping through the pages and came to the basking shark. He was excited to learn about a strange shark, and the illustrations by Robert Eggleton were wonderful. Looking up from his book, he saw some fins off the starboard side of the boat. He sheltered his eyes with his hands to see better and counted 4 black fins in the distance. "Hey, Dad, look out there," he yelled back to his father, pointing. "What do you see, Jim?" "Fins. Looks like sharks." Gordon Rogers stood up from his seat at the pilot station and looked out to where his son had pointed. He was tall, with a bit of a pear shape. His baseball cap was tucked down tight, keeping the sun out of his eyes, protecting his balding head from sunburn. The sun's glare was obscuring his sight, so he reached down and grabbed his binoculars. He set the boat on autopilot and looked to the water. It took him a few seconds to focus where James pointed, and then he saw the fins. He couldn't tell what species of shark was out there, but he decided to keep an eye on them. "What do you think, Jim? Great whites? Tigers?" "I don't know, Dad, but look, there are more rising. They're getting closer." Down below, Gordon's wife, Janet, yelled up to him, "Honey, what's going on?" "There's some sharks out here, and they're headed our way." Janet Rogers came halfway up the stairs from the galley. She looked over the rail and squinted to see what got both of her guys all excited. "I don't see anything." "Out there, at about 2 o'clock, Gordon answered, using his arm to point out the fins. Janet used her hands to shade her eyes and looked out where Gordon was pointing. "Oh, I see them. Are you sure they're sharks? Maybe they're dolphins." Julia came running up the stairs at the word dolphin. "Dolphins? I love dolphins. They're so cute. Can we swim with them?" Her 2 blonde ponytails were bouncing in the wind. The look of awe on her face was amazing. She was so full of life. "Where are they? I can't see them. Daddy, let me use your binoculars." "It's binoculars, honey," her mom corrected. "And they're not a toy, they are an adult thing." "Oh, poop." "Julia Elizabeth Rogers, watch your mouth," her mother said. "Yes, Mom." "Gordon?" Gordon heard his wife, but was focused on the school of sharks moving in the direction. "Gordon?" No answer. "Gordon!" Janet yelled. Gordon quickly looked back at his wife with a scowl on his face. "What is it, Janet? Can't you see him watching these sharks?" "Gordon, look," said Janet as she weakly pointed behind her husband. Gordon quickly looked where his wife was pointing. His mouth dropped open in shock. There were at least a dozen fins following in their wake. They were as close as 20 feet away. Julia looked beyond them and also saw the fins. Are those more dolphins, Mommy? Janet pulled her daughter into her arms and said softly, No, honey, I don't think so. Dad, James yelled, there are more fins out there. He pointed towards the first fins they had seen. Gordon looked and saw that the number of fins had doubled. They were weaving along snake-like in their direction. Gordon looked at Janet and Julia and then to James. Where was his youngest? Janet, where's Jackson? Did he come up with you? Janet tore her eyes away from the water and looked at him slightly confused. What did he just ask her? And then the words began to make sense. He's down below, taking a nap on our bed. Okay, Gordon said. Take Julia down below and I'll get James. Dad! Gordon looked up after hearing his son scream. James, are you all right? Dad, look over there. James was pointing towards the stern. Gordon looked past his son and was immediately troubled by what he saw. He turned to Janet and said, Take her down below and secure yourselves. But what? Do it now. Janet scooped up Julia and headed below decks. Gordon watched his wife and daughter go down and then headed forward to his son. He grabbed his binoculars on the way and settled down next to James. James, you should go down below. Dad, I want to see what that is, as he pointed towards the shape coming towards them. Gordon raised his binoculars and adjusted the focus wheel. What he saw chilled his bones and made him fear for his family's safety. He saw a shark fin coming towards them, but not just any fin. This one was huge. It was still too far away to see any detail, but he guessed it was at least 4 feet in height and created a wake that rivaled many large boats. The shark was moving fast, and he knew he didn't have time to navigate away from it. He looked around and saw many smaller fins. This wasn't just a school of sharks passing by. This was an attack. Gordon jumped up and grabbed James by the arm. Ow! James claimed. What? Yeah. We have to get down below, right now. But Dad, I want to see. No, James, we are going now. Gordon dragged his son to the rear of the jumping Janet and shoved him down the stairs to the cabin area. Wild-eyed, Gordon looked around and saw the sharks starting to circle his boat. The larger fin was almost on top of them. He could hear James crying from down below, and he felt awful about it, but he needed to make sure his family was safe. He checked once more that the autopilot was still engaged and gave one last look around. What he saw sent creeping tingles up his neck and onto the back of his skull. The large fin was coming abreast of the ship. He looked over the rail to see the largest shark he had ever laid eyes on. It was almost as long as his 60-foot yacht. It was grotesque in shape and size. As it passed his ship, he saw an entourage of smaller sharks swimming behind it. Gordon hurried below deck and closed the rear hatch to the living area. The hatch was aluminum, keeping it light and secure. He threw the deadbolt and then turned and jumped against it. He breathed a sigh of relief and then looked at his family. Janet had all 3 children huddled around her. All of their eyes were like silver dollars and filled with fear. Gordon, what is it? Janet asked. I have to call the Coast Guard. All 3 children were crying, making it hard to concentrate. But Gordon went to the small room that housed their radio and sonar units. He sat down at the desk and searched out the Australian Coast Guard's frequency. Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is the Jumping Janet, a 60-foot sailing yacht. We are 1,124 kilometers off the coast of Sydney, somewhere in the Tasmanian Sea. We are surrounded by a school of sharks, and they are becoming more aggressive to our ship. My wife and I have 3 young children here, and we are in fear for our lives. We need help as soon as possible. Please send a cruiser or helicopter. We need help. Gordon waited for a response, and all he heard was static. Do you think they heard you? Janet asked. Gordon sighed and looked over his shoulder at his family. I don't know. I hope so. I think we're in big trouble. A loud thump on the hull of the ship was quieted everyone in the room. Another louder thump sounded towards the bow. The children screamed, as did Janet. Gordon looked at his wife, and the look on her face scared him more than anything he'd ever seen before. Another, stronger thump sounded on the opposite wall. Gordon looked over and saw a crack on the wall, and he thought he saw a trickle of water. Gordon, what is it? I think the sharks are ramming the boat. What do they want? I don't know. Gordon? Gordon looked his wife straight in the eye. I think they want us. Oh my God. A stronger thump hit the wall. Gordon was sure he could see a large crack forming. Then water began to spray into the room. He looked down at his children. They were scared and crying. James reached out and Gordon took him in his arms. He looked up at the wall as it caved in, letting the ocean into the room. Tons of water poured in, knocking them over and across the room. Gordon held on to his son and wiped water away from his eyes. He looked across the room and saw a shark's face forcing its way through the ruptured wall. He was hoping the water would kill them before the sharks did.